And so I guess this question relates kind of more towards like the healthcare UX side of things in the sense of like, if you're doing, interviews or kind of one-on-ones or even group, sessions with, uh, you know, patients or people who are if impacted by, healthcare issues, um, you know, how do you kind of deal with the balance between like as a researcher you want to be analytical, you want to be able to be observant and being able to have a little bit of distance so you can kind of see these larger patterns, but also kind of deal with the fact that you are kind of hearing someone maybe even spill their guts on like very personal, very intimate situations that could even have caused them a lot of trauma. So kind of how do you kind of
Hmm.
go with that balancing act versus maybe other UX applications where if it's just like, shoes or, lipstick, it's a lot less emotional. I mean, there is probably emotions
Yeah.
with those too, but, not as the same way. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. That's a very interesting question. Um, Partly because, hmm. So 100%, I've done UX on websites, I've done UX on alcohol sales, I've done it on developments of I'm a producer for a YouTube channel that I also moonlight with the UX there because they don't have a bunch of money, right? Like so I do this in a bunch of different places. And it's 100% true that they all contain emotions and they all contain trauma, right? No matter what, humans are trauma informed. So everywhere we go, there is some level of emotion and some level of trauma, even talking to someone about their shoes, right? The One of the most formative moments for me when I was doing some UX research for a shoe store in DC, and it turned out that everyone was buying new shoes at this shoe store when it was raining because they were ruining their shoes because they'd forgotten their umbrella and their shoes were soaked and they needed a new pair because they had a meeting that afternoon and didn't want to be completely soaked. And so the main driver for the purchasing of new shoes was a physical trauma that was driving them and this emotional fear that their boss was going to be upset that they're looking like a sagging wet sack of block when they're supposed to be giving a presentation, right? Um, so there's that in everything, right? The difference is that in health, there's a really famous quote from Derek Featherstone, at least in the health UX world, that when you're designing accessibility in health or in anything, you're not designing for someone else. You're designing for yourself in the future, right? Because every single one of us will at some point have a health crisis. By the time we're 70 years old, 95% of the population has had at least one major health crisis. So at some point in your life, you will be the sick person, period. I have a greater connection to that because I was the sick person at 5. So health research is simultaneously more in my bones, but also much closer to my own personal traumas. So there is a degree of almost a crossover with medical practitioners and what they need to do, right? You will learn when you're getting ready for medical work, you will learn about bedside manner, you'll learn about compassion fatigue, you'll learn about all these things that most people never talk about. That once you start doing UX research in the health world, you have to start studying because you start encountering it on instead of like a medical practitioner where it's a different person every day and so different traumas every day, you're getting very interactive and very engrossed with families for a long period of time that are having things happen to them that might be very close to home. I remember early 2020, I was working with a rare disease group. No, no, sorry, early 2022. I was working with a rare. Oh, you helped me with this one, Michael.
Yeah.
Um,
That's like sounds familiar.
A, AGSAA. They had children that were totally fine. They were born fine, they looked fine, they moved fine. And then suddenly, around 2 to 3 years old, they started regressing and regressing massively. My daughter was born in 2017. So when I was interacting with these groups, she was between 4 and 5 years old. And some of these children were 4 to 5 years old and regressed to 6 months old. And I distinctly remember having phone calls with them, talking to them, putting on the bedside manner, doing everything you're supposed to do to make them feel calm, to make them feel like you're listening, to make them feel like you're empathetic, all that stuff, but not involving yourself, right? You can't involve yourself in this sort of research or you're going to invalidate it. Right. I can't be like, oh, yeah, man, that makes me think of my daughter. Right. Because now I'm invalidating the research. So putting on all the face, getting off the call and just breaking down in tears and going and hugging my daughter and having to realize that I couldn't do these studies repeatedly, right? Realizing that in this space in UX, you have to build in times for activity and times for like on and off times. You have to build it almost like you're building deployments for military men, which was like the weirdest thing for me to start realizing that like the closest representation was like you're in essentially a combat zone, trauma wise, that every moment of every day when you're spending 8 hours a day talking to families in trauma is vicarious trauma, every single one of them, which also then led me to some of the research that has been done on police officers because they also experience really high loads of vicarious trauma by just witnessing all these horrible things that are happening to people. And you're at least in the health UX research world, you're slightly removed, right? Like you're not the one who gets the phone call when the kid dies, right? But you're the next day talking to the mother whose child has just died, um, or watching on the phone as an infant vomits blood because they have translaterals through their lungs. And the parents responding with, oh, this happens all the time. So you get this even secondary level of vicarious trauma where they're responding to it like it's an everyday event. And to you, it's horrible. And you can't process that. So, one of the major aspects of health UX research to me is finding a support system uh, and not viewing it like it is product research, right? It is product research, but the product is a human and you are one. So you are going to be empathetic and it is going to hurt and not assuming that it's not going to.
Yeah, no, that's a great insight. And I think especially like, yeah, kind of taking the same mindset as what you said, like as a doctor or a therapist, or just like where you kind of have to be very honest of like, oh, this is emotionally impactful, and then to plan accordingly instead of just like, yeah, pretending that it's not, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yep.
It's very interesting application for sure.